so good. Hi, hello, and welcome to episode 3 of The Library is Open, Zorling. So I hope you brought your library cards. Right, that's that over with. Hi, welcome to, as I say, the 3rd episode of The Library is Open. First of all, I want to just say thank you so much for everyone who's engaged with my first 2 videos. I know that they're sort of scrappy and homemade, but that's kind of my personality. So, so this is what I do. I kind of like the idea of just sitting and talking, because then it sort of feels like I'm having a conversation with you. You know, like you might do on a live video or something like that. I really enjoy that. So yeah, that's probably how it's going to continue. And apart from the fact that I have very limited technical skills as well, very much a paper person, which probably extends to like I have the Kindle app on my phone for books, but I really prefer actual books, secondhand preferably. You know, for planetary and environment reasons, so on and so forth. And whilst I recognise that, you know, digital versions of books are probably far better, although it probably matters less if you're buying books that are already used. Yeah, but there's just something about holding something, isn't it? Like the texture and then the smell. Book sniffer, that's a hashtag that I just really like. So that's my secret vice. I'm sure I've got many, but that's one of them. Anyway, so I noticed after the first 2 episodes, where's my water actually? Gotta stay hydrated. I've just done yoga for reference, hence. I never know what my hair's doing in these videos either. Sort of alfalfa-like at the moment. But that's alright, we can live with it. There's a bit of water to keep hydrated. So I noticed that I'd done 2 sort of quite... I don't want to say they were similar in theme, because obviously they were not the same author or the same subject matter necessarily, but they both felt like quite reflective. So Anita Bruckner's Look at Me and Jim Harrison's The English Major, episodes 1 and 2 respectively. If you haven't seen those, go and have a watch, or don't, it's up to you. So I wanted to change tone a little bit. Now, here's a little habit I have with reading. So I'll tend to read one book during the day. I know. Well, the daylight hours, let's say, and then after a certain time I'll read another book that's maybe slightly more relaxing, or where I might have to pay slightly less attention to it because it feels more soothing than focusing on something that really requires like full-on attention. Not that that's a hard and fast rule, obviously. I think, you know, everyone should read how and what they want to read. I don't sort of like book snobbery in any way, but that's just what I do anyway. So I've usually got 2 books on the go at any one time, which is nice. I like them to accompany me on the train to work and stuff like that, or even just to have in my bag. I really like having books near me. I think I've mentioned this before, as like, you know, even if I'm not going to read them that day, if they're in my little handbag, I like that a lot. Anyway, so this is an example of one of the books I would read in the twilight hours. And without further ado, here she be. That's this week's book, Chosen by Kiersten White, which is, as it tells you on the cover, from the world of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, in the interests of full disclosure, this is actually book 2 in this particular series of, I suppose if you were going to look in the shops, it'd be under YA, young adult fiction, but I'm not really bothered about categories or anything like that. Or, you know, I think books are for anyone and everyone, and just read whatever you want, and whenever you want. But so there was a first book in this series which I read last year when it first came out, called Slayer, which was, as I said, the first in the series. I don't know how many there's going to be. I'm suspecting at least a trilogy. That tends to be a trend in sort of fantasy YA fiction. So this is, if it is a trilogy, this will be the middle one. And yeah, this was written in 2020. Well, published in 2020, I should say. So it's brand spanking new. Oh, and it smells so good. Oh, it really does, though. they used to do a perfume at Boots. I think it was called the Scents Library, and one of them was called Books, and I was really excited for it. And then I went and smelled it, and it didn't smell anything like. So that's sad. Because I would have worn the heck out of that, as you well know. We walk around like smelling like a municipal library, just like, yep, that's me on the dance floor, like dance, 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 and all that, sniffing a Books. But anyway. So yeah, the reason I chose this was, well, you may not know this, you might have noticed in episode 1 that I was wearing a Buffy the Vampire Slayer t-shirt. But, you know how people have, usually a certain, it might be a song or an album or a film or a book or a piece of art, whatever, that sort of typifies their adolescence or early adulthood. Mine was and will probably always remain Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I was sort of getting into my early teenage years when it first premiered. So I was probably roughly the right age to sort of appreciate it. And, you know, it became the series that it felt like I'd been looking for, if that doesn't sound too melodramatic. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a massive influence on me, a huge part of my life. I'd never seen anything like it. I remember the first episode was on BBC Two, because it used to air on Sky One, but we didn't have Sky. And it was BBC Two, and it must have been either around Christmas or New Year kind of times, because I was at my nan's house, and we were all there, like all the fam, and that would only have happened at Christmas or New Year. And they showed on BBC Two Welcome to the Hellmouth and the Harvest, which is episode 1 and 2. It's like a dual 2-part opening of season 1 of Buffy, and I was immediately hooked. You know how sometimes you don't have to even think about a show or whatever, you just know immediately that you're just going to follow this religiously. And I did, and it became a huge part of my life, absolutely huge. So I followed it religiously, and since the series ended in, I think 2003, I think it was 2002 or 2003, with the final 7th season, which kind of wrapped up the Buffy arc, it's continued on in comic form and in various novelizations and spin-offs, of which this series is one of them. I can't stop. I'm going to stop. That was 3 times. I'm limiting myself now. That's enough. So, if you haven't seen the series, what are you doing? Go and watch it. But if you haven't, because it's relevant to this book as well, just slight recap. So the idea is that, voice over voice, in every generation there is a chosen one. She alone will stand against the vampires, the demons, and the forces of darkness. She is the Slayer. So yeah, one girl chosen in every generation to fight the forces of evil, who's watched over by a watcher, who's usually English, who comes from the Watchers Council in England, and it's sort of the legacy of the Slayer stretches back into the annals of time to sort of like Neanderthal cave dwellers, and then there's a mystical energy that is, you later discover, spoiler, is crafted from demon energy that was placed inside the Slayer and each successive Slayer that supersedes the previous one. So you get a brand new Slayer when the previous Slayer dies. And at the end of the 7th season, the mythology arc ends with Buffy having discovered a mystical weapon that was once owned by the Slayer, and she uses it to awaken every possible person in the world who might be a vampire Slayer and make them a Slayer. So she shares her power. Powers are like super speed, fast healing. I say super speed, I don't mean like Sonic. I mean she's just quick. She's got good reflexes. It's like Sonic, as I say, prophetic dreams, strength, skill, and this sort of mental connection to the lineage of the Vampire Slayers from time gone by. Other websites, and indeed the series, will explain this much better than me, because there's a whole lot of mythology around it, but, you know, it sort of centres around those basic tenets. Anyway, so this series, to get back to the book, is set in the aftermath of that, when all the potential Slayers in the world have been awakened. And this series is set in Ireland, primarily, where the last of the Watchers Council live. Now, spoilers, in Season 7, the first evil, this is of the TV show, blew up the Watchers Council and killed the majority of them. So these last sort of vestiges are living in this castle in Ireland. You find all this out in book 1. And our antagonist, or protagonist, probably both in these books, is Nina, who is a twin to Artemis, and they are both Watchers at the start of this saga. Shock horror though, it turns out Nina is actually a vampire slayer. And this causes quite a lot of conflict with her twin and the other people who live in the castle. Now, in the second book, after the sort of setup of Slayer, which is book 1, this is chosen, we find her twin sister has gone off with her girlfriend, who may or may not be working for and or with someone who is exploiting demons and selling their sort of natural essences as like drugs. But there's something else going on as well. It's quite a deep conspiracy. And so Nina has turned the castle where they live in Ireland into a sort of sanctuary for benign demons and also slayers from around the world. Because magic has been cut off from the world, basically. And so the depths of hell, which is where the demons come from, the Hellmouths, is sealed from the above world, and the magical connection between the two is gone. So it's sort of left demons stranded and people stranded in the Hellmouth down there. So in this book, it sort of chronicles Nina's attempts to sort of, I suppose, feather her nest in a way that she's created. Obviously, there's relationship troubles that she's got with a guy called Leo, who in the first book turned out to have betrayed her. Turns out that he was the son of a succubus who was posing as a watcher and secretly trying to drain the inhabitants of the castle while they slept. Anyway, he returns in this book, slightly worse for wear. No spoilers. And Nina has to sort of confront her metaphorical demons about whether he can be saved, rehabilitated. Is he really evil? Is he really good? Is it slightly more complicated than that? Moral implications and sort of ambiguity is something that Buffy the Vampire Slayer has always done really well. Obviously in the main series there's the whole plotline with Buffy and Angel, Buffy the Slayer and Angel the vampire, and later Spike the vampire, with whom there are relationships that are fraught with uncertainty and expectation, and also the weight of past, the nature of good and evil. It's really complex. Also in this book we have plotting to take down the evil drug dealer Sean, who deals in demon flesh, as it were, who is somehow tied up with a new threat from a force called the Sleeping One, who's about to achieve his third and final form, which is seriously bad news for the world. And Nina is shocked to discover that Artemis and her girlfriend Honora are working with Sean to help the Sleeping One, but is everything what it seems? We're not sure. Now, I don't want to sort of spoil that plot, and as well, because it's, as I say, if it's going to be a continuing storyline throughout, then, you know, I couldn't possibly explain it all here. But Suffice it to say, it's well structured and well plotted. There's some delightful moments. I want to say that you could probably read this as a standalone book, and you probably could, providing you'd read book one. But I think if you've seen the series as well or know enough about it, there's some brilliant Easter eggs in it with returning characters from the series that we haven't heard from since they weren't on screen anymore. And just little allusions to things that if they won't impair your reading if you don't understand what they're referencing, but if you do, then it's just like a little, oh, I remember that from the show, you know, that sort of idea. So yeah, for YA as well, without any snobbery, it's well written, and the emotional lives of the characters are painted pretty well. It's mostly first person point of view from Nina, but we do get occasional sort of chapter breaks with Artemis, the rogue sister, as it were. And that's really helpful because it's central plot really, which the series always did so well, was aside from all the supernatural threats, it's one female protagonist coming to terms with her inner self, who she is, what she has the potential to do. And the true nature of herself as well, and trying to balance that. Is she inherently good? Is she inherently evil? And what does that mean? And Joss Whedon, who created Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was so good at using the metaphor of demons, monsters, things that go bump in the night, to present a supernatural version of things that people were going through emotionally. I'll give you an example. In season 1, for instance, there's an episode called Out of Sight, Out of Mind, also known as Invisible Girl. Out of Mind, Out of Sight, sorry. Also known as Invisible Girl, in which there's a girl at the high school that Buffy attends who is so ignored that she begins to disappear. There's the metaphor. There's an episode called The Pack, where Xander is possessed, and it's one of Buffy's friends, is possessed by the spirit of a hyena demon. And that's sort of used as a metaphor for pack behaviour in teenagers and male violence against women and stuff. It's not as heavy-handed as I'm making it sound here. It's actually really good and really quite menacing. And the whole sort of story of the arc, really, of Buffy discovering, and then subsequently Nina and the other Slayers discovering that the source of their power is this legacy of female strength, but that was ultimately created by the corruption of men way, way, way back when, and it's sort of about rising above that adversity and taking hold of that power that's inherently yours. Or theirs. Ours. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. It's really, really nice. It's great to see another spin, quite a contemporary one as well, because watching the series back now, it's very of its time. It's weathered well, but there's a lot of references in there that are, you know, very sort of 90s, early 2000s, and this sort of presents what a world with the Slayer in might look like in 2020. Yeah. So it drew me in, as Buffy always will, you know. Maybe I'm labouring metaphors a bit much here, but as someone who's queer and, you know, sort of has had those moments of feeling outside of things or struggling to come to terms with their identity. My earlier years, the Buffy was like a light in the dark, I suppose, in some ways. Some of my happiest memories of growing up are watching that show, and I suppose in retrospect idealising a time that wasn't as great as it seems at the time, but it's bit like having a filter over it, where I'm able to remember the really great bits, the bits that made me excited, the bits that made me feel home, I suppose, is the way to put it. So I will always have a massive respect for the franchise, and long may this book series continue. If you do want to grab hold of a copy, I do recommend getting the first one, Slayer, and obviously watch the series. I'm not on commission, I promise. I just really want you to experience it. I push it on everyone. I'm like, this is great, this is great. I even use Buffy in my teaching a lot at the university, because it's a great example of subtext in writing, and also it's a great example of flipping the script on tropes and stereotypes, because Joss Whedon as creator is brilliant at setting up something you think is going to happen and then doing the flip reverse, and you're like, oh, that's clever. So yes, widely available, chosen second book in the Slayer series. If you decide to pick it up, or if you decide to dip into Buffy, or revisit Buffy if you love it, drop me a comment below and let's chat. I will talk about Buffy all day, every day. Seriously, I'm that obsessed. This is me. This is me. That wasn't even the right tune, I'm sorry. So yeah, we're hitting the 21-minute mark now, and I think that's enough for this week, because I could ramble all day. As Elvis Costello once said, don't start the talking. I could talk all night. That's not what this video is. So thanks for joining me once again in my musings on life, death, love, literature, and vampire slayage. Next week's book will be listed in the pinned comment below when I've decided exactly what it's going to be. And I'll do that as I post the video, so that if you do want to read along, as it were, you can. Alright, thanks for joining me yet again. Keep that library card handy and keep turning those pages. Alright, my loves. Last time. It's like a drug.